thanks everyone for joining us for this this kind of new format. We'll see if it works, called The Surgery. I think we've been panelists on many things, and we tend to find ourselves answering the same questions about ourselves. So the idea is that people can possibly come to us with problems that they may be having, concerns or inquiries about their workflow that we might be able to help with. We reached out to the internet, and we've got a bunch of questions that have come in from there, which I will be answering as well. And thanks for joining us online. We'll also be recording this, so if you are at the back and have missed any answers, you can catch up on YouTube later. But first, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel. Going from left to right, we have Anne Nikitin, who's a composer, who's very famous for your work on The Imposter, American Animals, hugely successful production, nominated for 11 British Independent Film Awards, including Best Score. And your most recent work includes 4 Kids and It. I pitched for that one.
Did you?
Get off to a good start. And Lost Girls is a new Netflix thriller. Next to Anne, we have Sam Sim, and I know Sam's been busy because I went to his website to look at what he's been working on, and he updated it in 2012. So Sam is soon to adopt digital recording technology. So Sam is an incredibly, I mean, it's very likely that at any point on a weekend you will hear one of Sam's score. He's absolutely killing it on TV at the moment. Home Fires was a big success. The track from that you did was also a big streaming success. The Halcyon, The Bay, I pitched on that. Innocent, and you've recently just completed a collaboration with Daniel Pemberton on The Dark Crystal. He's also done, I think, what is arguably one of the best sample libraries we've done in a long time, called BDT. So interesting that Sam's kind of gone into this world of the creation of sounds as well, which is a kind of an interesting development, I think, for composers in general. And last but not least, Nainita Desai, am I pronouncing that right?
Desai. Yeah.
Desai, okay. And having an amazing year at the moment, all sorts of great work. The Confessions of Thomas Quick, Raped My Story, Catching a Killer, and the interactive game Telling Lies. And was it For Summer?
For Summer, yeah.
Which has been a hugely successful production, which has won 35 top prizes, including Best Doc Feature at the Cannes Film Festival. So welcome and thanks for joining us. So I'm actually going to kick off, so you can kind of get the kind of measure of the kind of questions I was hoping to get, with a genuine question from my own career, and a question I don't have the answer to. And that is, I was working on a project with a director I really liked, and the project was fantastic. But there was a producer who gave me the signals that he was going to make my life really, really horrific. So I pretended I had a medical condition and walked off the production. Is that a good idea? It's a hugely successful production as well. It's in its 4th season now. Should we start with you?
Do you regret it?
I got the feeling. No, I don't regret it from a point of view of I think that it was good for my health to do. But what I do regret is I could see that it spread like wildfire. I remember actually you rang me up and said, "What is everything all right?" Because you'd heard on the grapevine, and I didn't realise how interconnected the industry is. And of course, you know, composers talk to composers, but obviously producers talk to producers. And that's what I've noticed recently is that when you're up for a job, maybe first time working with a director or producers, they will simply reach out to someone. They'll look at your IMDb page and reach out, and they'll go, "Well, he's got a medical condition. I wouldn't." That's my kind of paranoia.
Yeah, not sure. Yeah, for me, I think I'm getting to the stage where I'm exhausted because it's just work after work after work, which is amazing. You know, I'm not moaning about it, but I think if you do feel that something is going to be too much, and it's going to affect you and your life, because there are a lot of hours in what you do, and it does consume every moment of your life, then I think if you do feel you need to turn it down, then you do need to turn it down. And I think it's important to do that and then not regret it, because it could explode and become the next big thing, and you've got to think, that's fine, I turned it down for a reason. And you do have to look after your health.
Absolutely. I guess the main difference is I'd accepted it. I mean, I hadn't signed the contract. I guess that would have been an issue. But I think we all very rarely sign a contract until the thing's usually TX'd, isn't it?
Totally.
But Sam, because I mean, you saw that happen. And have you ever done it, or would you ever?
I haven't actually walked off a job, but there's been loads of occasions where I thought I probably should. I did a BBC drama series, and it was a really odd setup where I had done loads of work with the director, but never worked with the writer and executive producer on it before. And the director briefed me. I wrote a score. I was there going, okay, we've got a very quick turnaround. I'm going to record it. Can I get any feedback? No feedback from anybody, nothing. Really, now we're really starting to run out of time. Okay? And then finally, yes, just go ahead and record it. So into the studio, orchestral recording, came the next day. The producer came and said, yeah, this is great. The day after that, the score was thrown out in entirety by the exec. And I was kind of like, right, well, this is a bit weird. But they obviously didn't like what I did, so they said, right, we'll do it again. And then, so I wrote another score and couldn't get any feedback. And then finally the same thing happened. And, you know, they're hemorrhaging money as well. And they throw the whole score out again. And then at this point I'm going, you know, what am I getting wrong? So we had a big meeting and the writer was briefing me. And I said, so, you know, what am I not doing? What do you want the audience to feel at this particular point? He goes, I want them to watch the cue, watch that scene and go, what the fuck was that? And so, okay, I'll go. Right, that score, did that got thrown out. No. And then at this point, I'm there going, okay, so I've written, you know, 3 scores for the same thing. Why aren't I getting fired? I just don't understand. And then it finally came down that I found that they hadn't found one piece of temp music in the whole of the series that anybody could agree on. And I was thinking, so if you were in a situation where you can pick any piece of music in the world ever, you know, what chance do I have of getting it right? And then finally I wrote a 4th score and everybody, oh yeah, this is it, and that's right. But then, oh my God, through that process though, when you're going through it, I just think, what am I doing? But I was kind of secretly hoping that I was going to get fired more than actually have to be the one to go, that's it, enough.
That's absolutely crazy. I worked on a similar story to this before I get to you, Nainita, is I was working on a film that had a magical statue in it that conjured it was a role reversal thing, conjured a spell. And the director was just obsessed with the idea of a kind of a leitmotif, a musical motif for this statue. And I looked back on the number of versions and I got up to version 37. And it was just like, and he was kind of rebriefing me and I just couldn't get there. And it was the rest of the score was going well, but it's just this one thing, this central figure. So he said, listen, why don't we just sit and you go through all of your sounds and then I'm sure we'll find something. So I went through a bunch of my sounds and I got onto some like DJ scratch tools. And I went, oh no, this is not going to be right for an Aztec statue. And he went, no, come on, let's just think out of the box. So I just played each note and it was like the, you know, car crash, the stuff that people scratch with. And then there was this voice that went, break. And he went, that's it. So there is this film where this Aztec statue, you walk past and it goes, break. Mental.
But that's a good point about, you know, should you actually walk off a job and not put a name to it when you've been forced or coerced into doing something that you're going, everybody's going to go, what the hell is this?
And I'm genuinely, I'm certain I wouldn't have got there on my own. that particular one.
Breakdown.
What about yourself?
Oh God, have I ever walked off a job? Yes, I have. I did. Very early on in my career, about sort of 2-3 years into scoring, and it was a natural history production, sort of big, 120-minute film about sharks or something. Yeah. And I had 5 weeks to score it, a lot of music, and the producer director was just making my life a misery, you know, endless rewrite after rewrite after rewrite. And we couldn't get off the first 2 minutes of the film. We spent 2 weeks on the first 2 minutes of the film. And I thought, this is just not working, you know. And she liked bits and pieces of it, but it just wasn't working for her. I thought I was producing something, you know, I was really happy with. So after 2 weeks, I think we were 2 weeks away from finishing, and I still had 45 minutes of music to write on the production. And I just thought, this isn't working, you need to get someone else. You know, I'm sorry, but I'm not being able to give you what you want. And she got really stroppy with me. How dare you walk off? I said, yeah, but it's a mutual thing. It's a two-way street. It's not working. So it's fine. She got someone else, and it was Dan Pemberton. So and he did the score in 2 weeks, and and I only found out. Yeah, I mean, whatever happened. But I'm going through it at the moment on a production. It's a Netflix series. And it's a really interesting production, and it's a great project. Everyone's gone into it, wanting the best. We all go in with, the best intentions, and we're going to get there in the end, and I'm not going to walk off. But there was one person who was bringing down the whole production. One editor was bringing down the whole series. And I was getting notes from him, sort of literally 4 pages of A4 per cue, in each episode, and we're looking, he likes to write, so I was getting an essay per cue, and I had about 40 cues to write, and that's just one program, that's just one episode, and I think communication is really important. I had to flag it. I mean, it's very much a case of, I'll take shit from people, and that's, I think, part of what we have to do is to take the pressure and the stress and all of that, and not whinge and complain. We have to be seen to be
each other.
Yeah, to each other.
This is what we're here for.
We have to be seen.
Safe space.
No one else has seen this, right?
Yeah.
Can anyone tell Sam? No, you've got a friend who does something where he corrects emails when he replies.
Yeah.
Anonymously, is that something you're allowed to talk about?
Probably not.
I always dread getting those emails really late at night, because you just know, it's been after a few bottles of Chablis, and I think they're incredibly difficult emails to deal with. I know of a producer who doesn't allow anyone to give email notes, which is, I think, a fabulous policy. So there's some questions that have been asked from people online, but you've made the effort to come here today. So I know sometimes when it's kind of a hands up thing, that no hands go up and then suddenly there'll be 15 hands up. And I can always go to the questions that have been asked online. But does anyone have a question that they have that they'd like to ask? So,
I've got one for all of you.
actually, we've got Asper, who was Star is Born yesterday with Tom Bowler. I don't know if any of you saw it.
Hey,
It's on.
hey, how's it going? A question for all of you, and it's about those dreaded recuts and conforms that you have to do when they've changed the score, they've changed the cut massively at the last minute. How do you do that? Do you have software that does it for you, like the Pro Tools users? Do you just slog through it? Is it something you get your assistants or kids to do for you? And have you ever wasted like a day, 3 days trying to do it, only to find out they've gone back to the original, and you're like, well, I've just wasted 3 days. I could have been making fresh new music for you, but no, chasing my tail. Like, yeah.
Well, no, and you get your kids to do the revisions, don't you?
Definitely. 5 and 8, they love it. This is something we do all the time, and it's constant, and I'm at the point where now I'm thinking I should probably try and get someone else to do it for me, because it stops you from working and writing music. Just constantly faffing around with getting new cuts and laying them in and then tweaking, adjusting everything. And I love the notes that you get. They'll say, the editor or the director will say, can you just make a tweak here, and we've recut it. And they think you're working with
Audio,
stems or audio. That's a little tweak. Actually, no, you've got to reload the thing and, realign everything, and then go through your millions of tracks and make those adjustments. And it's never a little tweak.
It's like open heart surgery, isn't it?
It is open heart surgery.
Sort of opening up the session and sort of splicing everything.
Yeah. And really, you just want to be writing your music. So I have discovered recently the world of music editors, which I'm sure I'm way behind. But wow, it's amazing.
Yeah, on larger projects, what new music editors will do will be to basically show you how you can do it. Often we'll go, I think if you do this, that, and the other, just take that bar out.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Or they'll just do it for you. I worked on Lost Girls, and the director was in New York, and I was here, and she was quite nitpicky about what she wanted. I mean, she was really lovely to work with, but she did want a lot of changes, And they hired a music editor who was sort of the go-between between me and her. And I hadn't experienced that. And it was amazing. And he did say that she was asking for quite a lot of changes that I never knew about. And he was just able to do them off my stems in Pro Tools, there and there in the edit with her.
Mm-hmm.
And God, what a lifesaver that was. So,
what about you, Sam? Is it something? I mean, it's part of our life, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it comes down to a similar thing about notes that you get from everybody, and it's about managing people's expectations of what you can do. And I think that when you're actually at the helm of delivering a score, you've got to be over the time it's going to take you to do the whole thing. And so if you are finding yourself in a position where you're constantly going back and doing re-edits or to new pictures, then at some point you have to say, no, we can't keep up with this, got to keep moving forward, and then we'll finalise this when we actually finally get locked. But it's very difficult. I was, as Chris said, I just worked on the Dark Crystal, which is a 10-part Netflix show. And so we had 10 hours that just didn't lock. And it was this massive beast that was just wearing around. I've got, I think, a drive of about nearly 2 terabytes of movie files from it coming in. And there's just no way you could keep up with it. So, everything, you know, one tiny change would change the time stamping for everything, and constant new pictures. As soon as you tried to keep up with it, a new picture would come in. You had several edits working on each episode at once. And so that was a very difficult thing to manage. But then we did have a very good music editor on it. And I also had an assistant whose job was pretty much just dealing with that. And then, but it's, you know, on a bigger productions, you do have those resources. On a lot of the stuff I work on, it's generally me, and I would say that you have to do what you can to keep up with them. But even if the edits are pretty rough and you're actually just throwing them together, I find that as long as I can get away with it until the lock, and then I will go in and make sure it's right. But it's just kind of, listen, that's what you're getting for now, because I've got to carry on and keep writing.
I've got 2 pieces of advice. One is, I think the more you do it, the better you get at it. It's like a muscle. And I've now, in a weird way, it's something I really enjoy. It's like they're little puzzles that you have to solve, and it's quite. I genuinely enjoy it. But the other thing I do is I make sure that my music doesn't work to the picture in the first place. Mm-hmm. So I think what you have to do, and it can be, you know, and I'm not being kind of flippant by saying that, but I think that you can create a rod for your own back by hitting every cut. Editors don't particularly like you hitting their cuts all the time because it makes the cuts very obvious, and it's not necessarily. I think that for me, the scores, you know, we all, I'm sure, love writing are the ones that tell you what's not on screen. So having to interact with the picture all the time. But there are little tricks like, you know, if you are going to hit pictures, I do little, picture cuts. I do like double hits. So actually the cut is somewhere in the middle of those 2 hits. So it's by being not too accurate with the cut in the first place, 1, it won't be as difficult to recut, but 2, it won't break your heart. So that would be my suggestion. Next question from inside the room. This gentleman here. We'll go to you after.
So my question was actually specifically about.
It is.
Okay, cool. And it's specifically about telling lies, actually, because that game is essentially just a Skype call, so it's actually for many hours. And what did that brief look like? And how did you even? Was it vague or was it very specific? And how do you write for hours of conversations?
Well, I mean, I treated it like because it's live action and there are 4 main characters, 4 main actors with a cast of 30. I did have to write in a modular way, which was totally new and different. I think the director wanted somebody with experience of working on linear and film and TV music as opposed to non-linear game music. So that was a fresh, sort of totally different approach for me. So because it's about 9 or 10 hours of drama, of action, I wasn't going to score 9 or 10 hours of music. The budget wasn't there. So we made a very, very specific decisions to only write. I mean, I literally spent 18 months writing 30 minutes of music. But it was a case of writing a theme for each character. So I wrote 4 main themes, and each theme was 5.5 minutes long. So it was like writing an album track, and each piece of music had to represent the essence of that human being, that person, that personality. And so I wrote a main loop, an exterior loop for the music, and then I'd write a hidden loop. And so when you delve deep into the game and you were revealing, because each human being has a schizophrenic sort of personality, a duality to their personality. So the main personality that projects itself to the world, and then the personality that is hidden. And so when you delve deep into that person's psyche, you then reveal the hidden loop in the music. And it was this very subtle tonal shift in the music where you think, oh, something's different here, and you're being influenced by the music. So then each 5.5 minute piece of music would be broken up into 6 or 7 chunks. And the challenge for me, musically, was to make the music flow narratively from start to finish, like a beautiful flowing piece of music. But with those 6 or 7 blocks, I then had to, they could be played in any order, which is sort of the basics of game mechanics. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G could be A, D, B, G, A again. And so I'd make the beginnings and ends of the blocks, write them so that they could sort of transition nicely. The other challenge is not being able to change tempo and not being able to modulate very much. So if I modulated between the blocks, it would sound disjointed and weird and odd. So I could modulate within the blocks, but not at the beginnings and the ends of the blocks. And I couldn't change tempo, so sometimes I'd have double time and sort of stick to the same tempo. And that was, I mean, in a nutshell, that's sort of the basics of writing for the game, really.
Really fun
And then I
because-
brought in the London Contemporary Orchestra, who were lovely to work with, and that was their first game as well. So we'd be in the recording session, and I'd break up each 5-minute piece into blocks, and we'd record it 1 block at a time, and sometimes we'd end on a suspension or something. I think, we want to carry on and carry on playing. I think, well, no, you can't do that. You know, I need to be self-contained blocks. And so that was a fun challenge for them. But then to create variations in the score, what we did was we did a semi-improv session in the recording session, which the LCO is so fantastic at doing. So we'd record the notes and the dots on the page, and then and I allocated extra time in the recording session to then do improvisational versions of those same themes and have different extended techniques. And so that when I was then presenting the music and implementing it into WYs in the game, we'd have blocks, and then we'd had 3 stems per cue. So we'd have a piano and a harp, and we have strings, and we have woodwinds as sort of separate stems. And each of those could be sort of combined in many, many different ways to create what was perceived to be fresh sounding music, and, you know, that took on board all the nuances and the details of the different played performances, all the variations and options. So I just chucked everything into the game, really. So
I'm certainly modularity in approach to live recording is something that I've adopted for computer games, but increasingly for TV. And is that something that you do, Sam, when you kind of starting a big multi-episodic thing, is to create?
Well, definitely. I mean, it's not as extreme, obviously, but when you've got, if you're doing multiple episodic television, and you go, okay, this is theme for this character and this and everything, and then you get your score for the first couple of episodes, and then that goes to the editors that then just throw it anywhere they want to. And so you can find that you're quite often smashing cues together because you go into a spotting session for further episodes and they go, we love this, we really want this to work. And you go, that's messing with my plan. But, you know, they have, you know, their own agenda. They're not pushing the same kind of feeling of a beautiful leitmotif or something. So it does become quite modular. You also, as I'm sure you know, with these kind of jobs, you get a certain amount of time for the first episode, but then it gets shorter and shorter. So at the end, you need to have a very quick toolkit that you can throw together.
You need to record stems, is what I'm finding as well.
Yeah.
Definitely in the recording session, when you get there, you allocate exactly which stems will be particularly useful and make sure you've got all of those there.
Yeah.
But the
So-
difference with stems in games is slightly different from stems in film, because with the stems that I was delivering, I knew that they would only be playing, sometimes they'd play the stems on their own, a stem on its own.
Yeah.
So it has to be like a self-contained piece of music,
Yeah.
whereas you can't do that with a film.
Yeah.
It's
a
not
TV
by
score.
instrument type like we do for dubs for film. It's more like, okay, that's action level 1, action level 2, action level 3, and they've all got to work independently but also together.
Exactly, yeah.
Should we go to this gentleman here next to Asper, and then there's been some great stuff coming in from the stream. So.
Yeah, obviously technology is a large part of what we all do as composers. Where do you guys see things going in sort of the near future? Is there any areas of making music technology-wise that you feel we should be moving towards, or things you would like technology-wise that are kind of holding you back now?
Looking at me. I had an email from somebody asking me to test his AI program, and I got really scared. I said no. It's kind of made me feel a bit sick, really, because it was being advertised as a composing assistant, and I believe what you would do is feed in your themes, and then it would spit out other themes, or you could just give it keywords. And that, to me, I'm sure this is where we're going, and I think that they're using this in a lot of advertisements now, and library music is being generated by AI, but that scares me, and I think we need the human touch. This is what music is all about, art, and so that's one negative thing I think is happening. But simultaneously, I do often think, when it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I would love a brain dump. Just to like a cable where you go, this is what I have in my head. So maybe we'll all have that.
I feel very strongly about this, and I just feel that we've just got to stop making music that sounds like it was made by composed by a computer. And that's what's so great about it, is because as the younger generations of directors come up, they will want stuff that doesn't sound like that. They'll want and it doesn't matter that it's AI or it's computers. It won't be an ethical thing. It will be, I just don't want the music to my production to sound mainstream. And I think by coming out of the box, using musicians, and being as humanly possible, we will create a demand that then we will need to fulfill. So I feel incredibly strongly.
There's nothing like going into a studio and working with real musicians, and you get into the studio and they bring your music alive, and you think, this is why we do it. Yeah. It's the most euphoric feeling.
And you can trace back through the centuries these things of it becoming incredibly formulaic and then becoming incredibly, expressive. And through, in the 1980s, bloody awful synthesized scores, and then, a massive attack, and Hans Zimmer and David Arnold made the orchestra cool again. So I think it ebbs and flows. I remember watching this TV series called Tomorrow's World, where they said, in the future, all you'll have to have is a green pill, and you'll not have to eat anything. It's like, well, but eating's quite nice. Well, it wasn't in the 1970s in Britain, to be honest. But,
just to go back to the original question, though, I think that there's a lot of horrors about the self-writing music and this that's going to put us out of a job. But just before we get there, I think there are some things that I would really like to see, and I don't think they're that far in the future. If you had an AI that could look at a paper score or a Sibelius score and then curate all the best samples for you, I think that would be incredibly useful. So that obviously there's packages that you can get with Sibelius which are far better than the general MIDI. But if you could imagine doing a sort of Spitfire sounds where you'd write in just a pizzicato or something, and then it would just source that into the line. I think that would be an amazing tool, and something that would really speed up the process. Because we do this dance I work in Logic. I go Logic, then take it out of Logic into Sibelius, go and record it in Pro Tools to mix it and everything. If I was able just to work in Sibelius, but it sounded as good as it does in Logic, that would be amazing. And I think to have some kind of AI that could really get into the the nitty-gritty of just your paper scores, that would be really useful. And the other thing that I would really like to see is if you think about mixing, and you're bussing everything into your mix channels so that you can have several things coming into one line at once. I'd love to see a similar thing in a DAW where you've got all your first violin articulations. I'd love it if you could just see them all on one stave. You know, it seems to be such a nice way of just kind of going, okay, so I've got all this completely messy logic thing where there's everything, but I can actually look at a piece of score and I can read it in terms of something that looks like score rather than just the mess of, you know, hundreds of MIDI
Fragmented
channels.
bits,
So,
Have you asked Santa for any technical advances?
I mean, for me, it's always been about breaking down the barriers of creativity and technology and getting that workflow out as fast as possible. You know, from hearing it in your head and trying to get it out, and that process is always slowed down by technology in a way. And so, I mean, in terms of performance, I was an early adopter of the Roly, the C-boards, and I love all that. I love the tactile nature of that kind of technology, you know, the expressiveness and human dynamics and injecting that. And I think there are other competitors now coming on board, like E Expressive. I think they've got a new keyboard kind of thing coming out. So I'm really keen on that kind of technology, using, you know, hand gloves and, you know, lovely Imogen Heap's Mimu gloves, all that kind of, you know, using technology and sort of bringing that organic human touch, you know, and getting expressive dynamics and that out.
And to go back to your question also to kind of partially answer yours, having worked on just one major computer game, Alien Isolation, it just struck me as really odd that everything was being rendered live except for the music that was being streamed off hard drive. And I think that it would make our jobs as composers much more pleasant if we were able to tell WYs to be generating the samples in real time, just take it up a minor third, which is what I always do if I'm getting bored of my music. We're going to go to some questions from the stream, which is absolutely fantastic. And thanks very much for joining us and for writing questions. How do you work in a situation where your boss director demands you completely copy the existing music, or rather, how do you CTFT? How do you deal with that, Sam? Sorry, CTFT stands for copy the fucking temp, which is...
Yeah, it's a continual problem. I think that as I've got more experienced, I'm better at reading what the temp is doing for the directors. And I think that trying to unpick it in terms of what it's doing emotionally rather than musically is really important. And if say the piece of music has a really strong melody, say, the important thing is to try and come up with a really strong melody rather than get close to the melody that is already there, because it's a completely unsatisfactory process for everybody involved, because however good your rip-off is going to be, they're always going to miss the original temp. And so somehow you just have to work at ousting it entirely and trying to come up with a completely new piece to fend it off, rather than being brought closer and closer. It's hard, very hard.
Absolutely.
I just think temp with my music, you
Yeah.
know, so I like to be brought on as early as possible, so that if I'm writing early ideas and sketches, then they can actually start with my music and not use anyone else's music. So you're eliminating the temp, and if they fall in love with my music and I'm having to then copy my own music, that's easier than someone else's temp. But then also I think I just did a spotting session for a film with a director, and he came round to my studio, and he was a dream to work with, because he had laid in some temp tracks, and there are a couple that he was really wedded to, and I said, it's about the emotional storytelling aspect. You know, what is it about the temp that's working for you, and just getting that communication process going. So, you know, what is it the strong melody? Is it the energy, the kinetic energy, the rhythm? What is it about the temp that's working for you? And then let's find a way of emulating that, the structure, the tone, the pace, the emotional side, with a new set of temp.
How do you deal with it?
same as
Same.
these two,
Yeah.
exactly the same. Because, like you were saying, it's just not satisfying for anybody. If you're copying temp, they're not happy because it's not exactly what it is. And you feel sick because you've just ripped somebody off.
Yeah, nice.
And yeah, it's a tough world. Sometimes you'll get directors who are really open to other things. You know, it is about getting to the emotion and what the scene is telling you.
But eventually you have to put your foot down as well, because
do,
you know the contracts they give you really tied up very tight.
Yeah.
And so if you know you do get too close, they'll come after you, the composer, rather than the production.
Yeah, and you do have to be careful. My worst temp request was when someone had temped it with Claire de Lune by Debussy, and the director went, but I wanted to be more emotional. I said, you tell fucking Debussy to write Claire de Lune again. I find it difficult when they temp with my music from other productions, because I feel that that's kind of bad for the gene pool. Something I always rely on is to go and do something very interesting that gives them a sense of unique ownership. So I was on a particularly difficult project with a very difficult director, and I just knew one way I could win him was to give him a shiny toy to play with, and that toy was 24 mandolins playing samples in Air Studios. And it was like, what's that sound? And it's like, it's 24 mandolins playing at Air Studios. It wasn't a bit of investment on my part. But I do think that, you know, you can get a musician in to come and just give you something that's unique. It's like, oh, get rid of this temp, I'm interested in this new toy to play with. Has been, in my experience. But reinventing the wheel every time you do a production is quite difficult. There's a really good question here that's actually been echoed through several different questioners. So I'll kind of sum it up in this one. Sorry, just find it. How do you balance big projects with other real-life relationships like family and friends? And I know someone else has been talking about considering having a family and just not knowing how you could possibly consider it, considering the demands of being a media composer. So maybe you could start with that, Anne.
Yeah. Yeah, I have 2 kids, and I thought I would never be able to handle having kids and working constantly. But it just does work, and I suppose I've turned down a few more projects than I normally would have, but I think that's healthy anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I've learnt to take back my weekends now, which I think is important because I never had them before, or evenings. But you are going to get in situations like I am currently, where you are up till 2-3 in the morning every night, and you just have to get up to take the kids to school and do all of that stuff and look after their emotional needs as well. But you just learn to work around it, and if you've got a partner who's also able to share the load, then it's...
Is a pragmatic approach to the actual composition necessary as well? You don't indulge in, I'm just going to sit here and...
Well, yeah, I'm on a clock now, so I've got, you know, after school drop-off until I pick them up. That is I've got a very small window, and I sit down and I just go for it, and I don't answer phone calls, so I have to apologise to my friends all the time, but I'm now at work, and then I put them to bed, and if I've got a grueling deadline, I'll go back to work until, you know, I have to go to sleep. So the clock does tick a lot more when you have a family. But I don't know how it manages, how I manage it, but it just does work out.
And Sam, you're often across several, you know, you can be, you know, finishing one project, starting the next, going straight from one to another.
Yeah.
Has it been difficult?
Oh, I think it's always a struggle. It's you know, it's I've got 2 kids, and I have a very understanding wife, which really helps.
She works in the business.
She works
Do you
in the
think that is helpful?
Yeah, she understands the you know, the nature of deadlines, which is it'd be very difficult to be in a relationship with somebody who didn't, I think. But I think for me, I can remember when I first got into the business, I'd go, oh, that's a film score I really love, that's good, that's not so good. And then I did my first day as assisting for a big composer, and I'm just so amazed there's any music on this at all. I had no idea you had to write it so fast. But then, and you'd see these massive productions, especially when composers got fired and moved on. I think Troy, for example, that one was
2 weeks or something?
written in
13 days.
Yeah.
Sorry?
13 days.
13 days.
Yeah.
so it's amazing what the demands are. But I've also found through my personal experience, if you give me 3 years to write a film score, I'll take 3 years to do it. If you give me 3 weeks or even 3 days, you'll get something there. And I think that when you have the demands of a family, I'm not kind of there at 3 a.m. getting that snare drum absolutely right, you know, as I used to. But it doesn't seem to matter. You know, you make your decisions faster. You go, is this melody good enough? Is this theme strong enough? Well, yes, it is now, because you have to do it. Yeah. And so you just understand you're working under different time constraints. But that, so far, doesn't seem to have had an impact on the music. I hope not.
But luckily also, I think we're at the age now where we're more confident, and we are faster because we've got our box of tools, as Ty likes to say, and so you know where to go for what. And also you're more confident with telling a director and editor, no, they're not going to get it. You know, I know they want it tomorrow at 11 a.m., but really, you know, I need another day. And they usually say, yeah, fine. And especially if they've got kids, then I think there's a further understanding that you can just delay things a little bit, give each other, cut each other some slack.
Absolutely. I mean, I always remind us that we have 2 jobs. We're composers and heads of... Well, actually, we have 3. We're composers, heads of departments, and we're CEOs of the company that is us. But do you, Nainita, in these situations have to adopt a kind of a pragmatism where producers and directors are concerned, going, listen, I can't take any more notes. We have to cut off by this date because we're not going to have any music on the stands.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I mean, I work to very, very strict deadlines. It's amazing. As you say, you can write... If you give me 5 weeks to write a score, I'll produce it in that time. If you give me, I mean, the last couple of big projects I worked on, I had 18 months with the video game, you know, and so I was working on it on and off all that time. Had I had 2 months to work on each one, I would have created, you know, a score that was probably just as good. But it's about going through those endlessly, you know, being a perfectionist, going through endless options and alternatives, and discipline focuses you. You know, 20 years on, I'm much faster at making those editorial decisions. You know, I had my stepdaughter was living with us for 2 years during her A-levels, and it was amazing the amount of work I got done. I'd wake up at 6 a.m, make her breakfast for her, make sandwiches. She'd go off 7:30. Great, I've got the rest of the day off, and I'd focus myself to write, you know, intensely and be productive and be creative in that time. And it's that discipline forces you to be creative. And then we'd have a family dinner at 7:30 every evening, Monday to Friday. You know, so I do, and like you know, I don't. I'll make sure in terms of notes and conforming. The earlier question, I'll make sure that on a production I will only conform 3 times. You know, rough cut 1, rough cut 2, fine cut, maybe picture lock. And I tend not to do all the internal revisions and things because it's just like the law of diminishing returns. Yeah. It's pointless doing changes. Let the editor hack the music to pieces, and then you know, and then I'll come back to it at the end because I need to spend my time efficiently being creative, writing music, not doing technical changes all the time. You know.
Absolutely brilliant.
There's also something lovely about having kids around because they come up to your studio and they tinker, and they kind of inspire you because I think they're quite proud of what you do and. They tell
push bananas in your speakers.
Yeah. Push bananas.
Your tweeters. I'd like to see your tweeters.
Yeah, I get a lot of smashed instruments, but it's so cute.
Fantastic. Well, let's throw it open to the room again. Any more questions here for Asper? Pass you a mic. There's a gentleman behind with a kind of reddish top.
Hi.
Hi.
So the argument of less is more is quite apparent in this industry of, you know, when you're doing stuff for screen, the less music there is, the better it is. How do you guys overcome that argument? Have you ever had a moment where, say with your 24 mandolins, is there a moment where you've really wanted to keep something in that someone's like, it's really taken away from the picture?
I just think we are absolutely, what we're doing is helping tell the story. And I think actually that ties in with what we've just been talking about. I think a way through, you know, you being uncertain about what you're doing is just to ask yourself, is it telling the story? Because that's if I'm not helping you tell the story, and if you're making me tell the story in a way that isn't helping you, then I think that's where you draw the line. And again, talking about pragmatism, I don't read the score anymore when I'm recording a band. I'm not obsessing about the music or the performances. I'm looking at the screen and seeing if the music is working on the screen, which is helpful for when Jake Jackson goes, should we do bar 16 again because there's a split in the brass? And I go, no, Jeep's exploding, we're never going to hear it. So I think that's where I would talk about pragmatism. But how do you deal with this kind of idea of they want it to do so much but they want it to do so little musically, if you know what I mean? Is that the kind of what you're getting at? Yeah.
Sorry, so can you say?
Well, I think that,
I'm really tired. Sorry.
No, I think that I don't know if you've experienced, may not have experienced this, that directors and editors want music everywhere because they want to hype their scenes, but they often don't want the music to kind of draw attention to itself, be too melodic. They want you to stay on the same notes. So it's achieving those goals of telling the story whilst not doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important to be subtle with your music, I think, and not take over the whole production. And, you know, I often get friends who go, oh, you did the music for that. Was there any music on there? And I think, well, then apparently I've done a good job, is what they say. But I have been in situations as well where directors want wall-to-wall music, and I've tried to fight for them to take pieces out.
So
I don't know if
difficult,
you've been in that
God, yeah,
situation. I just think, why are you doing? It's like they rely on music they're scared of silence, and they're scared of what they've shot or edited and put together, and so they do often come to you and say, can you help us out with your music? Yeah. So sometimes you have to try and argue for more silence in their films. But yeah, I mean, I've often been in situations where you've got to really be respectful of the film and put music on it, but not get in the way. And
I used to overwrite. You know, I think that's a very common thing to do. Look, I can show off. Look what I can do musically. And for the first 5-6 years of my career, I just sort of overwrite, and I kept getting the same notes back from editors and directors saying, "You're doing too much. You know, the music's too forceful. It's too dominant and strong." And I thought, and then the penny dropped, you know, and I started stripping down my arrangements. And now it's interesting, there's this zeitgeist of not writing to picture so much. And I come from that old-fashioned school of crafting and writing to picture and hitting lots of points in the scene. And so I sort of, now I'll just play through the drama and not do that so much and just write music. As you say, it's a much more efficient way of writing, and actually people want that. They're yearning for it, you know, where you're just playing and sort of writing through the emotion of the scene. And it's amazing how effective it is, you know. You're saving yourself a lot of time, and how effective it is in not, you know, sort of overselling the story. Because, I mean, when I'm working, I always have the audio from the... In Logic, I'll have the audio from the sync and the voiceover or the dialogue on screen, and that's part of the music track for me. You know, if the actors are talking, that's like the lead vocalist, and I'll work around it and sort of keep it stripped back and let that tell the story. You know,
it can be quite hard with technology though, because if you just think this would be great for a solo violin, but your samples are not very good with just one solo violin. Yeah. So I tend to add pads and other things to kind of make it shine.
Yeah, you want to
luckily
cover it
we've
up.
got Spitfire.
Yeah.
They're fantastic samples.
Yeah, we've had this conversation, haven't we?
Yeah, many times.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, naturally as composers, you want to write music. And then you know, and I've been in situations with directors where they're going less, and I'm there, I've got, okay, my piano melody is now 3 notes, and you want less of it. And you go, well, what am I going to do? But I think that, you know, you do have to work very hard to get something very simple. And you hope, I try and narrow it down so that if you get the sense of, say, something that's supposed to be nostalgic, and you think, okay, let's do a piano waltz that you'd hear from a silent movie or something, you can actually find that when you start distilling it down into, I'm just going to have something that just pulses on that 3/4, and I'm just going to touch the odd bit of piano, I can still get the sense of something that was nostalgic and this piano was because it's just been reduced to its most basic form. And I think it's just hunting out those ways of getting the emotion into something that's really simple. you know, easier said than done.
Absolutely. I think that for me that music is like a set of senses, and I think I would describe melody as sight, but sound as smell, and I think that sound does carry an emotion. We had lunch with someone recently who described the evolution of the Batman theme. So it started with the TV series, na 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 na, lots of notes, and then it went to Tim Burton's da 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 da, and then ended up with da na.
Yeah, no, but we were also talking about it going, and then that was actually taken out.
Exactly. That's it. Any more questions in the room? How are we doing for time?
We've got 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Just to get an idea. Over this side, we've neglected you guys. There's a gentleman with the cap.
So I've got quite a sort of basic question. I do work with short adverts and sort of bespoke for corporate pictures and stuff, but I want to get into longer form short films and stuff like that. Do you have any sort of tips for someone like myself who wants to get into more long form composition?
Oh gosh,
And
working.
do you prefer one like shorter or longer sort of compositions, stuff like that?
Well, I prefer long form as opposed to short form and promos and commercials. Having worked across the board, I prefer long form because it's meatier. You can get into writing a whole body of music, and it's more emotionally satisfying, creatively satisfying for me personally. In terms of getting into writing music for short films, starting off small, I think, it's working with filmmakers who are making short films. They're more open to bringing on board composers with perhaps a little less experience, and it's an opportunity for you to really find your voice as well, I think. So contacting film schools, working, because they are the filmmakers of tomorrow. Contacting filmmakers from film schools who are making those kinds of films, they're your first port of call, I think. The National Film and Television School in Beaconsfield, the London Film School, putting your name out on their notice boards works a treat. And shooting people, there are lots of portals and websites now. There's Shooting People, Talent Circle. People are looking for composers all the time. And Facebook groups of there are so many filmmaking Facebook groups out there. So it's just connecting with producers, filmmakers, editors, not just the most obvious filmmakers, but also you'd be amazed. I got a job from a lighting cameraman recently who recommended me to the directors. So it's knowing all different types of people in production is really useful.
I would say that I'm quite amazed how a lot of people come to me. I'm not saying this is in your case here, but a lot of people come to me and say, I want to get into this, I want to do this, and this is the kind of stuff I'm doing now. But they don't actually have any music to show that they can do longer form or something. So that you kind of go, if they're working on a certain thing like short adverts, they've got the most incredible CV of experience and a lot of music, but they don't really have any music that's long form. And I think that you've actually got to show, just go out there and do it. Just write some longer pieces. And I think that even if you don't get the commission to do it, if you just take a bit of film and go, okay, I'm going to rescore it, and then at the end of it, you've got something for your show reel to actually show, yeah, this is a longer piece of music. If somebody is going to give me a sniff of an opportunity to try and get onto a short film or a longer film, feature film, then you can actually say, yes, this is what I do. This is the kind of music I can write. This is how I develop that theme and stuff. And like anything in this business, I think that the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the more you learn through doing it. So I'm not sure if that answered your question at all. Yeah, do it.
Yeah, I have the same answer. I spent years scoring short films around my day job and just practicing, just getting to grips with how to interact with a director and how to sculpt music to picture. And when it came to my first proper commission, I was ready for it, and I don't think I would have been had I not done the short films. So yeah, I would do that. And also, people are really into, artists now. So if you wrote an EP of music that people can stick into their films, and you go around and say, why don't you use this? That's another way of maybe getting into it.
General thing that I'm saying I'm not, I didn't do successfully, but I have seen other composers do very successfully, is I just think being seen in the scene, but not necessarily amongst other filmmakers and producers, but actually being part of the composing fraternity, I think is a really important thing. And when people talk about the value of, say, living in a hub like London or LA or Berlin, it's get out there, go to things like these, and you will be seen as a recognisable face. I know this, over the years I've seen you at many panels and stuff, Nainita, and Daniel Pemberton certainly. I know that when he was really busy, he'd still make that effort to turn up at kind of composer gatherings and BAFTA events, even if it was just for half an hour and stuff. And that's something that I didn't really do, but I think that it's important just to kind of get yourself out there and to become a trusted face, a figure, a friend. And I think that actually composers, really, if you were to look at the safest route into composition, it's usually composers helping each other out, whether that's someone giving you a break as an assistant or really desperately needing your help as an assistant. So I think that is an important part of what we can do. I'm going to, there's just one more question over here. Just there. And if we can make the answers quick, because I've got just one more from the stream I'd like to do, so don't cut me off in the control room, please.
Hi, so I'm a firm believer that no matter what stage you're at, whether you're just starting out, you've been doing it for many years, that there's always something that you're still struggling with, and I thought it would be interesting to know what each of you struggle with. What's your biggest struggle?
For me, the viola clef.
I've got a trick for that. I think it's always a struggle. Sometimes I start a job and I go, just because I've written lots of music, does that mean that I am able to write anything else? And you just kind of feel like everybody struggles with that. And the other thing is that, as you were saying about how to avoid temp music, you come up with that, 20 mandolins or whatever. I know that when I go into every job, everybody's going to want that special thing. And then, you're there going, oh, come on, brain, now's a really good time to have that.
Another style of wheel.
Yeah, and especially now, it's very unfashionable just to get to say, okay, we're going to do period drama with a string quartet or something. You need a constant flow of ideas, and I think that that it's not easy. It's a struggle. You've got to work and think and wrestle with it until you get something good, and it's not easy.
Not easy.
Yeah, as you say, I think every project is a unique creative challenge in its own right, and I'm constantly trying to reinvent the wheel on every project. So I'm just starting a production which is a series about hip hop, and so I'm going to have to collaborate with the hip hop producers, but the director wants to hear hip hop from me, and I am so not your stereotypical hip hop producer. Wonder why. But it's fantastic because it's enabling me to dive into this new world of production, and I think, how do you create, how do you do that? And I have a newfound respect for, Dem Joints and Dr. Dre and all these great guys who have spent a lifetime immersing themselves and developing a sound. So immersing myself in new styles of production and new styles of music on every project, I find it's terrifying, but also I think you have to embrace that challenge and just enjoy it and go on that journey and learn. It's a lifelong learning thing, isn't it? Music is just production, writing, orchestration. Every aspect of what we do is just a new experience, and we have to be all of those things these days. We have to mix and engineer, program, and all of those things. So everything's a challenge.
I think time schedule is a massive challenge all the time, especially when you've got multiple projects that overlap, and it's that constantly being delayed, and then another project will start, and then it's how to manage 3 different directors, and struggling with that, and then also obviously struggling with what these guys have said, sort of having the imposter syndrome where you think, really? Why are they hiring me? And can I do this? And yeah, can I write something like I've just done? You know, I've got no more ideas, I'm tapped out, but then suddenly you get into it again.
I've just got one last question, if we could be brief, so maybe in a couple of sentences, but it's a lovely question to end on. Did you, any of you, have a moment, very particular and obvious, where you realised that your dreams have actually come true and that you are now professional media composers? So when imposter isn't in the room, let's go from this side to here.
I think when I saw my name on the end credits of a BBC wildlife programme, because that was one of my bucket list dreams, to have work on a David Attenborough programme for the BBC. I thought, have I made it? But yet I still feel I haven't made it 20 years on. You know, it's like you're constantly climbing your way up that pyramid. But so I just enjoy every job as it happens. You know.
I think I remember the first session, my first orchestral session at Abbey Road Studio One. I walked through the doors of Abbey Road feeling, yeah, this is amazing. You get that complete buzz of doing it. And then you walk down the corridor towards the control room of Studio One, and you go past the Star Wars poster, the Empire Child, and slowly you get smaller and smaller. And you finally get in there and go, yeah, the first person that recorded in here, I think, was Elgar. What about you?
Mine was quite defined. I had been working in short films and I had a crap job for many, many years. And then I won a BBC competition. It was like a one-off. It was to find a new TV composer, and it was a week of workshops and blah, blah, blah. And anyway, so I ended up winning that, and the prize was a commission to score a BBC Natural World episode, which was my dream job. So yeah, so when I scored that, and the director had to, teach me, this is a premix, this is a picture lot. And, but yeah, scoring that was, I thought, yeah, finally.
I think an obvious answer for me, and actually you were present, was Alien Isolation. Was the composer I was copying only wrote 4 minutes of music for the original Alien, and we had to come up with 8 hours. So it was me pretending to be him was exciting, but it wasn't the moment when I realised I was a media composer. The moment was, cheesy as may sound, was when my daughter was born. That was the moment where I went, the only way I can put food in this person's mouth, because I'm just not qualified to do anything else, let alone this, appears to be being a media composer. So I've just got to effing get on with it. Anyway, thanks for you guys for joining. We're going to be carrying on with there's going to be a tombola for everyone that's here. But for everyone who joined us online, thanks so much for your brilliant questions. And do join us again tomorrow at 1700 hours GMT, where I'll be interviewing my brother Joe and his partner Alexis to talk about their work on Alien Isolation, on Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Horizon Zero Dawn. So see you tomorrow. Thanks ever so much.